Billionaire's daughter points to a pregnant woman on the street and says, "Can she be my mum?" His response is unbelievable. The afternoon sun felt warm on Jack's face as he adjusted Sophie's small hand in his, 5 years old. Blonde hair that shone golden in the light, blue eyes like the sky after the rain. She was the perfect image of her mother, and that hurt every single day. "Daddy, can I get ice cream?" Sophie swung her little legs as she walked, always 2 steps behind him. "Of course, princess." It was Saturday, the day he tried to be the father she deserved, the father Sarah always wanted him to be. But it was hard. Everything was hard since she was gone. The ice cream shop was 3 blocks from home. A simple walk that Sophie loved, because they passed by the park where she could watch the dogs running and the children playing. Jack liked it too, but for other reasons. He could pretend he was just a normal dad taking his daughter for ice cream. "Daddy, look!" Sophie pointed to a golden retriever chasing a ball. "He looks like Rex." Rex had been their dog. He had died 2 months before Sarah. Jack hadn't had the heart to get another one. "He really does." They kept walking. Sophie chatted about school, about the new teacher, about the drawing she had made in art class. Jack listened with half his attention. The other half was always on Sarah, always on her. It was when they passed the corner of Maple Street that Sophie suddenly stopped. "Daddy," Jack followed her gaze. On the sidewalk, leaning against a lamppost, was a woman, young, maybe 25, brown hair tied in a messy bun, simple but clean clothes, and a round belly, very round, very pregnant. The woman was sitting on the curb, a small backpack beside her. She looked tired. She looked lost. Sophie let go of Jack's hand and took 2 steps toward the woman. "Daddy, is she okay? Sophie, come back here." But Sophie didn't come back. Instead, she tilted her head to the side, the way she did when she was thinking hard. Her blue eyes suddenly lit up. "Daddy," Sophie whispered, but loud enough for the woman to hear. "Can she be my mum?" The world stopped. Jack felt as if someone had punched him in the stomach. Sophie's words echoed in his head like a broken bell. Before he could answer, Sophie clapped her hands and shouted, "I'm going to have a little brother." "Can she be my mum? I'm going to have a little brother." Jack closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them, Sophie was jumping for joy, pointing at the woman's belly. The pregnant woman looked in their direction, having clearly heard everything. She looked surprised, maybe even scared. "Sophie," Jack tried, but his voice came out weak. "Daddy, look, she has a baby in her tummy," Sophie said excitedly, not realizing the discomfort she was causing. "Just like Mommy had with me, right?" The woman shifted uncomfortably, pulling her backpack closer to her body. Jack saw a mix of confusion and fear in her eyes. "Come on, Sophie, let's leave the lady alone." "But Daddy, I want to talk to her." Jack held out his hand to Sophie, who hesitated for a moment. She looked at the pregnant woman, then at him, then back at the woman again. "Sorry," Jack muttered to the woman as he passed her, holding Sophie's hand. The woman just nodded, still looking confused. "Daddy, why can't we talk to her?" Sophie asked as they walked away. Because she doesn't know us, princess. But we could get to know each other," Jack sighed. How could he explain to a 5-year-old that the world didn't work that way? "It's not that simple, Sophie." They reached the ice cream shop. Sophie ordered her usual, vanilla with rainbow sprinkles. Jack ordered a coffee. They sat at a small table near the window. Sophie licked her ice cream in silence for a few minutes, but Jack could see she was still thinking about the pregnant woman. "Daddy? If she's my mum, will the baby be my brother or my sister?" Jack almost spilled his coffee. "Sophie, she's not going to be your mum. We don't even know her." "But what if she was?" Sophie insisted. "Then would it be a brother or a sister?" "We don't know if the baby is a boy or a girl, princess." "I want it to be a girl," Sophie smiled. "I've always wanted a sister." Sophie's words cut through Jack's heart. Always wanted a sister. How had he never realized that? "Really? Yeah. Jenny from my class has a little sister. She's so cute." And her sister always wants to play with her. Sophie swung her legs under the table. I wish I had a sister to play with me, too. Jack didn't know what to say. Sophie had never talked about wanting a sibling, but thinking about it, how would she? It had just been the two of them since Sarah died. Sophie, Daddy, do you think I'll ever have a sister? The question hung in the air. Jack looked at his daughter, 5 years old, blue eyes full of hope, dreaming of a sister who might never exist. I don't know, Princess. But it could happen, right? If you find a special person who has a baby in her tummy. Jack swallowed hard. Sophie's logic was simple, innocent and painful. It could, he admitted. Sophie smiled and went back to licking her ice cream, clearly satisfied with the answer. On the way back home, Sophie insisted on walking down Maple Street again. The pregnant woman was still there, the sun was setting, and she was huddled, hugging her backpack. Daddy, she's still here. I see her. She looked sad. Jack looked closer. The woman really did look sad, and alone, very alone. Sophie let go of his hand and took a step toward the woman. Hi. The woman looked up, surprised. Hi, sweetie. Is your baby a boy or a girl? Jack quickly approached. Sophie, don't bother the lady. It's okay, the woman said softly. It's a girl. Sophie's eyes lit up. A girl. Daddy, it's a girl. Jack felt his face get hot. I'm sorry, he said to the woman. She's very curious. No problem. The woman smiled a little. Tile, she's beautiful. What's her name going to be? Sophie asked, completely ignoring her father's embarrassment. I haven't decided yet. I like the name Lena, or Emma, or... Sophie, Jack interrupted. Let's let the lady rest. But Sophie didn't move. Instead, she tilted her head again. Do you have a place to sleep? The woman hesitated. Jack saw in her eyes that the answer was no, but she said, Yes, I do. Sophie made a suspicious face. Are you sure? Sophie. Jack pulled her by the hand. That's enough. Let's go home. This time Sophie obeyed, but she kept looking back as they walked away. Daddy, she lied. How do you know? Because she looked just like you do when I ask if you're sad. How you guys make the same face? Jack stopped walking for a second. Sophie really did notice much more than he thought. What face? Like this. Sophie made a serious expression, like you want to say one thing, but you're saying something else. Jack didn't know what to say to that. At home, he made dinner, spaghetti with tomato sauce, Sophie's favorite. They ate at the kitchen table, as they always had since Sarah died. Daddy? Yes, Princess. Sophie played with the spaghetti on her plate before speaking. Will I ever have a mom again? There it was. The question he dreaded most. The question he knew would come eventually. Jack put his fork down on his plate. Why are you asking that? Because I wish I had a mum, and a little sister too. Sophie looked at him with those enormous blue eyes. I've always wanted a sister, Daddy. Jack took a deep breath. Sophie, you know I love Mommy very much, right? I know. And you know she'll always be your Mommy, even though she's not here. I know that too. Jack tried to choose the right words. I'd maybe someday, if I meet someone very special, maybe you'll have a stepmom, but no one will ever take your mommy's place, ever. Sophie nodded, as if she understood perfectly. And the little sister. That would depend on a lot of things, Princess. On the special person already having a baby. Jack felt his heart ache. Among other things, Sophie suddenly smiled, like the lady from today. Sophie. Daddy. Did you like her? Sophie. I don't even know her. But did you think she was pretty? Jack didn't know how to answer. Had he? He had barely paid attention to her appearance. She seemed like a good person. I thought she was pretty. And sad. Sophie picked up a piece of spaghetti with her fork, and lonely too. How do you know she's lonely? Because nobody leaves a pregnant person alone on the street, right? If she had family, they wouldn't let her. Sophie's simple logic was devastating. and probably right. So maybe her family lives far away. Then why doesn't she go there? Jack had no answer for that. After dinner, at bedtime, Jack read Sophie a story. She chose a book about a girl who found a family of bears in the forest. Daddy. Jack was arranging the teddy bears on her bed. If we help the lady, can she be our friend? Jack stopped what he was doing. Why do you want to help her, Sophie? Because she looks lonely, and I know what it's like to be lonely. Sophie snuggled between the teddy bears. And because if she's our friend, maybe I'll have a little sister to play with. Jack felt a tightness in his chest. Sophie was lonely too. Even with him there, she was lonely. Sophie. Daddy, Mommy always said we have to be good to people, right? She did. So we should be good to the lady too. Jack tucked the blanket around Sophie. We'll see, okay? Okay. Sophie closed her eyes. Daddy? Do you think the lady is cold? Jack looked at the window. Outside, the wind was rustling the trees. Maybe. And the baby? Is she cold too? Maybe, Princess? Sophie opened her eyes again. We could take her a blanket. Sophie, just a blanket, so she and the baby don't get cold. Jack looked at his daughter, 5 years old, and she already had a bigger heart than his. Sleep now, okay? We'll talk about this tomorrow. Promise. I promise. Sophie smiled and closed her eyes. In a few minutes, she was asleep. Jack sat in the chair next to her bed for a long time, just watching her. She slept, just like her mother, on her side, with one hand under the pillow. When he finally left the room, Jack went to the living room. He sat on the couch where he used to sit with Sarah to watch movies. He could still smell her perfume there. He took out his phone and opened the photo album. He scrolled until he found the one he was looking for, Sarah in the hospital, holding newborn Sophie. She was radiant, even after 12 hours of labor. She was looking at Sophie as if she were the most precious thing in the world. And she was. Jack touched the screen, as if he could touch Sarah's face through the photo. What do I do, honey? He whispered. Sophie wants a sister. She wants to help a pregnant stranger on the street. And I don't know if I can do it. But he knew what Sarah would say. She would say to help. Without a second thought, without questioning, without being afraid. She would help because that's what you do. Jack looked at the living room window. Outside, it was cold, windy, and somewhere, a pregnant, lonely woman was maybe cold too. Sophie was right about one thing. Nobody leaves a pregnant person alone on the street, unless she had no one. Jack closed his eyes and took a deep breath. For the first time in 2 years, he wondered if it wasn't time to stop just surviving. Maybe it was time to start living again. For him, and for Sophie, who deserved to have a sister if that's what she wanted. Jack woke up to the sound of the wind hitting the window. When he opened the curtains, he saw the sky was grey and heavy, the kind of day that promised cold and rain. He went down to the kitchen and made coffee. Sophie was still asleep. It was Sunday and she could sleep in. Jack liked these quiet moments in the morning, when the house was still and he could pretend everything was normal. But today was different. Today he couldn't get the image of the pregnant woman on Maple Street out of his head. Had she spent the whole night out there, in this cold? He took his coffee mug and went to his office. It was a small room where he sometimes worked from home. It had a desk, a chair, some bookshelves, and a window that looked out onto the backyard. Jack turned on the computer and tried to focus on his work emails. But Sophie's words echoed in his head. I've always wanted a sister. Mommy always said we have to be good to people. He was trying to reply to an email about the week's project when he heard little footsteps in the hallway. Sophie appeared at the office door, still in her pajamas, her blonde hair messy from sleep. Good morning, Daddy. Good morning, Princess. Did you sleep well? Sophie came into the office and walked to the window. She put her little hands on the glass and looked outside. It's really cold today, huh? It is. You'll have to wear a coat if we go out. Sophie was quiet for a moment, still looking out the window. Jack could see her mind working. Daddy? Sophie turned to him, her blue eyes serious. So it's really cold. The lady with the babies, is she still on the street? The question cut through the air like a blade. Jack stopped typing and looked at his daughter. "I don't know, Princess." "But she could be, right? If she doesn't have a home..." Jack didn't answer because the answer was yes. If the woman really had nowhere to go, she could be out there right now, cold and pregnant and alone. Sophie walked over to his desk. "Daddy, if she's on the street in this cold, can the baby get sick?" Jack felt a tightness in his chest. "Sophie, it can, right? Babies get sick easily." Sophie climbed onto the chair next to his desk. "My teacher said we have to take care of babies because they're little." Jack looked at his daughter, 5 years old, and she already understood more about compassion than many adults. "That's true, Princess." Sophie swung her legs in the chair, thoughtful. "Daddy, yesterday you said that Mommy would help the lady." "I did. Mommy would help." "We can too." The words came out simple, direct, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world, and maybe it was. Jack stopped breathing for a second. "Mommy would help. We can too. Sarah really would help. Without hesitation, without questioning, without thinking about the consequences. She would see a pregnant woman in the cold on the street and do something about it." "Sophie, we can help, right, Daddy? We have a big house. There's the little room out back that nobody uses." The little room out back. The old guest house that Sarah used as an art studio. It had been closed up since she died. "Princess, it's not that simple." "Why not?" Jack tried to think of an answer that would make sense to a 5-year-old. Why wasn't it simple? Because he was afraid. Because he didn't know the woman. Because he was still grieving and didn't know if he could help someone. Because we don't know her. But we can get to know her. Sophie tilted her head. "Mommy always said that everyone starts as a stranger, but then they become friends." Another memory of Sarah. She really did say that. She'd say there were no strangers, just friends you hadn't met yet. Jack looked out the window. The wind was stronger now. The trees were swaying, and he could see leaves flying around. "It's really windy," Sophie said, following his gaze. "And it's going to rain too. Look at the clouds." It was true. The sky was getting darker and darker. "If it starts raining, the lady will get wet," Sophie said softly, more to herself than to him. "And the baby too." Jack closed his eyes. He imagined the pregnant woman trying to shield herself from the rain with just a small backpack. He imagined her cold, wet, with nowhere to go. "Daddy, can we at least see if she's still there?" Jack opened his eyes and looked at Sophie. She had that serious expression she made when something really mattered to her. "Why is this so important to you, Princess?" Sophie thought for a moment before answering. Because she looked just like I do when I have a nightmare. Scared and alone." Sophie fidgeted in the chair. "And because I want to do something good, like Mommy used to do." Jack felt something stir in his chest, a feeling he hadn't had in a long time, the will to act, the will to make a difference. "Okay, let's go see if she's still there." Sophie's eyes lit up. "Really? Really? But first, you're going to have breakfast and get dressed." Sophie jumped off the chair and ran to hug his legs. "Thank you, Daddy." Jack ran his hand through her blonde hair. "Go on, Princess. Go get ready." Sophie ran out of the office. Jack heard her running up the stairs, talking to herself excitedly. He sat in the chair for a few minutes, staring at the computer screen. The work emails seemed much less important now. Was he doing the right thing? Would Sarah approve? Jack knew she would. Sarah always approved of acts of kindness. 20 minutes later, they were in the car. Sophie had insisted on bringing an extra coat, in case the lady is cold. Jack had grabbed a bottle of water and a few granola bars. "Do you think she's still there?" Sophie asked as they drove. "We'll see. What if she's not? Then we'll be happy she found a warm place." Sophie nodded, satisfied with the answer. When they turned onto Maple Street, Jack immediately saw that the woman was still there. She was sitting in the same spot, but now she was huddled over, trying to protect herself from the wind. Her backpack was clutched tightly to her chest. "She's there," Sophie exclaimed. "Daddy, she's cold. Look how she's all curled up." Jack parked the car in front of her. The woman looked in their direction, Recognizing them from the day before, she looked surprised. "Come on, Sophie." They got out of the car. The wind was really strong and cold. Jack could imagine what it must have been like to be exposed to it all night. Sophie ran ahead of him and stopped in front of the woman. "Aye. Are you cold?" The woman smiled, despite her visible discomfort. "Hi, sweetie. I'm a little cold." Jack approached. Up close, he could see the woman was trembling slightly. Her lips were a little purplish from the cold. "Sorry to bother you again," Jack said. It's very cold today." "It's okay." The woman's voice came out hoarse. "You're both very kind." Jack took a deep breath. It was now or never. "Look, I know you don't know me, and I don't know you either, but—" He glanced at Sophie, who encouraged him with a smile. "There's a spare room at my house. You can stay, just until the weather gets better." The woman stopped trembling for a second, as if she wasn't sure she had heard correctly. "Just what?" "It's true," Sophie said excitedly. "We have a little room out back. It has a bed and everything." The woman looked from Jack to Sophie, then back to Jack. I can't, you don't even know me." "Exactly. That's why I'm offering." Jack knelt down to her level. "You're pregnant, it's cold, and it's about to start raining. I can't just leave you here like this. But I'm a stranger." "Everyone's a stranger before you get to know them," Sophie said, repeating her mother's words. The woman looked at Sophie with a soft expression. "Your daughter is very wise. She gets it from her mother." Jack stood up. "So, will you accept?" The woman hesitated. Jack could see the conflict in her eyes, the desire to accept fighting against natural suspicion. How do I know you're not dangerous?" It was a fair question. Jack thought for a moment. "You don't. Just like I don't know if you're dangerous." He offered his hand to help her up. "Sometimes you just have to trust people." The woman looked at Jack's outstretched hand, then at Sophie, who was smiling encouragingly. "What are your names?" "I'm Jack, and this is Sophie." "Hi," Sophie waved. The woman smiled for the first time since they had met her. "I'm Rachel." "Hi, Rachel." Sophie seemed delighted to finally know her name. "Are you going to come with us?" Rachel looked up at the sky, which was getting darker, then at Jack. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." Rachel took Jack's hand and got up with difficulty. The large belly made movement hard. "Thank you," she whispered. "You're welcome." Sophie jumped up and down with joy. "Rachel, you're going to love our house. And the little room. It has a window that looks out to the garden." Rachel smiled at Sophie. "I'm sure I will." Jack helped Rachel with her backpack, and the three of them walked toward the car. As Rachel was settling into the back seat, Sophie ran back to where she had been sitting. "Sophie, what are you doing?" Jack asked. Sophie came running back with something in her hands. It was her favorite teddy bear, a brown bear she took everywhere. "Here," Sophie said, offering the bear to Rachel. "He takes care of me when I'm scared." Rachel looked at the bear, then at Sophie, her eyes filled with tears. "Sophie, this is yours." "I know, but you need him more than I do right now." Sophie placed the bear in Rachel's lap. "He's very good at scaring away the fear." Rachel hugged the bear to her chest. "Thank you, sweetie. I'll take very good care of him. His name is Bear. It's not very creative, but he likes it." Rachel laughed through her tears. Bear is a perfect name. On the way home, Sophie chatted about the house, the room, about how Rachel was going to love everything. Jack listened through the rearview mirror and could see that Rachel was listening attentively, smiling at Sophie's excited stories. When they got home, Jack took Rachel to the back of the yard, where the old guest house was. It was a small but comfortable room, with a single bed, a dresser, an armchair, and a bathroom. "Here," Jack said, opening the door. "You're safe. You and the baby." Rachel entered slowly, looking around. The room was clean. Jack paid a woman to clean the whole house every week, including this room, even though no one used it. "It's perfect," Rachel whispered. "There are linens in the closet, towels in the bathroom. If you need anything, just knock on the main house door." Rachel sat on the bed, still hugging the teddy bear. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to. Just, Make yourself at home, okay? Rachel nodded, tears returning to her eyes. It's been so long since someone was kind to me. Jack felt a pang in his chest. What kind of life had Rachel been living? Well, you have a safe place now, you can rest. Jack was leaving when Rachel called him. Jack, he turned around. Thank you. Really, you saved my life today. Jack didn't know what to say. Had he saved her? It seemed like an exaggeration. He had just offered a room. Get some rest, we'll talk more later. Jack closed the door and went back to the main house. Sophie was in the kitchen, looking out the window that faced the guest house. Did she like the room? Sophie asked. She did. And Bear? Did she like Bear? Jack smiled. She loved Bear. It was very kind of you to lend him to her. Sophie smiled, satisfied. Now she won't be scared anymore. Jack looked out the window too. He could see the light on in Rachel's room. For the first time in 2 years, that space was being used again. Daddy? We did the right thing, didn't we? Jack looked at Sophie. 5 years old, blonde hair, blue eyes full of kindness, just like her mother. We did, Princess. We did the right thing. And for the first time since Sarah died, Jack felt that maybe he could be the man she always saw in him. Rachel had been at the house for 3 days when Jack finally got the courage to ask. It was Wednesday night. Sophie was already asleep, and Jack had gone out to take the trash to the curb when he saw a light on in the guest house. Rachel was sitting in the armchair by the window, looking outside. He knocked gently on the door. Rachel, you okay? I'm fine. Her voice came muffled through the door. Just can't sleep. Jack hesitated for a moment, then decided, Can I come in, or would you rather be alone? There was a pause before she answered. You can come in. Jack opened the door slowly. Rachel was in the armchair, a cup of tea in her hands, looking out the window that faced the front street. She was wearing one of the pajama sets Sophie had insisted on lending her, too big for her, but warm. The teddy bear was in her lap, between her hands and her round belly. Can't sleep? Jack asked, staying near the door. Not really. Rachel took a sip of her tea. The baby moves around at night, and I'm a light sleeper. Jack noticed she was glancing at the street every few seconds, as if she were expecting to see something or someone. Can I sit? Rachel nodded. Jack sat on the edge of the bed, keeping a respectful distance. Rachel, I don't want to be nosy, but... Are you waiting for someone? She stopped drinking her tea and looked at him. Why do you ask? Because you keep looking out the window, like you're waiting or watching. Rachel put the cup on the small table next to the armchair and sighed deeply. I'm not waiting. I'm afraid someone might show up. Jack felt a chill run down his spine. Say someone like who? Rachel was quiet for a long moment, her hands resting on her round belly. Jack could see she was struggling to decide whether to speak or not. The baby's father, she finally said. Does he know where you are? No, at least I hope not. Rachel looked out the window again. I ran away from him, Jack. Almost 2 months ago. Jack felt his stomach turn over, ran away. Rachel took several deep breaths, as if preparing herself to tell a story that hurt a great deal. We were dating for a year. In the beginning, he was perfect, kind, attentive, affectionate. He brought me flowers, took me out to dinner. She placed a hand on her belly. So when I found out I was pregnant, he was overjoyed. Said he'd always wanted to be a father, that we were going to be the perfect family. Jack waited in silence, knowing there was more. But then, things changed. Slowly at first. He started getting possessive. He didn't want me to go out without him. He didn't like my friends. Rachel gave a humorless laugh. He said it was because he loved me so much and wanted to protect me. And you believed him? At first, yes. I thought it was cute that he was protective. Rachel shook her head. How naive I was. Jack felt anger rising in his chest but tried to keep his voice calm. What happened next? He started controlling everything. First it was my phone. He wanted to know who I was talking to, what I was saying. Then it was my money. He said a real man provides for his household. Then it was my clothes. He said certain outfits were too provocative. Rachel paused to breathe. He decided where I could go, who I could talk to, and what I could eat. He said pregnant women had to take care of themselves, that he knew what was best for me and the baby. And when you questioned him, then he would get furious. Rachel unconsciously touched her left arm. At first, he just yelled, said I was ungrateful, that he did everything out of love. Then, Jack clenched his fists but kept his voice soft. Then he started hurting you. Rachel nodded slowly. A few times, a push here, a tight grip there, but he always apologized afterward. He'd cry, say he loved me, that it wouldn't happen again. She looked at Jack, and I believed him, every time. How long did that go on? Months. I lost contact with everyone. My friends stopped calling because I always cancelled our plans. My family lived far away, and he always had an excuse for me not to visit them. Rachel wiped away a tear. I became completely isolated. It was just me and him. Jack felt like punching something, but he forced himself to keep listening. What made you realize you had to leave? Rachel was quiet for a long moment, her hands instinctively protecting her belly, until he hit my stomach. Jack felt like he had been punched himself. He hit you while you were pregnant. I was 5 months along. I had spoken to the neighbor when I went to get the mail. I just said good morning and commented on the weather. Rachel paused, trembling. When he got home, he was furious. He said the neighbor told him I was flirting with the mailman. And that wasn't true. Of course not. I barely spoke to the man, but he didn't believe me. He said I was a tramp, that I was making a fool of him. Rachel took a deep breath. When I tried to explain, he pushed me. I fell and my stomach hit the corner of the table. Jack had to control himself to not get up and break something. Was the baby okay? She was, thank God. But I bled a little and panicked. He was terrified too. I think that's when he realized what he'd done. Rachel looked at her own hands. But that's when I understood I had to get out of there. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about her too. It's really a girl. Rachel smiled for the first time since she started telling the story. It is. I'm going to name her Lena. I've always liked that name. Lena is beautiful. Thank you. Rachel became serious again. So I started planning. I saved a little money in secret every time I went to the grocery store. I hid important documents. I waited for him to leave for work one morning and ran away. And you've been on the streets ever since. Ever since. 2 months of sleeping in shelters when I could get a spot, on park benches when I couldn't. Rachel looked around the room. This is the first place I've felt safe since I left. Jack was silent for a moment, processing everything. Rachel, does he know you left town? I don't know. I hope not. She looked nervously at the window again. But he has contacts, friends in different places. If he really wants to find me. What was he like when he got angry? Rachel shivered. He was unpredictable. He could be smiling one minute and exploding the next. You never knew what would set him off. She hugged the teddy bear tighter. Even now, I'm still scared. Jack got up from the bed and went to the window. He looked out at the street, silent and dark. Rachel, look at me. She turned her face toward him. You're not alone anymore. And here, no one will hurt you. Jack, you don't understand. He's strong. It doesn't matter what he's like, Jack said firmly. You are safe here. I won't let anyone hurt you, ever again. Rachel looked at him for a long moment. Why are you doing this for me? You don't even know me. Jack thought about the question. Because it's the right thing to do. And because you deserve to be safe. Rachel wiped away a tear that had trickled down her face. Thank you. Try to get some rest, okay? We'll talk more tomorrow. Rachel nodded. Jack? If he shows up here, you don't have to get involved. You can just let me go with him. I don't want you to get hurt because of me. Jack looked at her in disbelief. Rachel, you're not going anywhere with him. Ever again. But ever again, Jack repeated. Rachel nodded slowly, as if she were starting to believe that maybe, finally, she really was safe. The next morning, Jack woke up to the smell of coffee. He went down to the kitchen and found Rachel there making breakfast. She had washed her hair and was wearing one of the shirts he had offered her. Good morning, she said shyly. Good morning. You didn't have to. I wanted to. It's the least I can do. Jack was about to protest when Sophie appeared in the kitchen, already dressed for school. Rachel, you made coffee. It smells so good. Good morning, Sophie. Did you sleep well? I did. And you? Did Bear help you? Rachel smiled. He did. He's very good company. Sophie sat down at the table while Rachel served breakfast. Jack noticed she had organized the kitchen too. The dishes were in the right place. The sink was clean. Everything was tidy. You organized the kitchen? Rachel blushed. I'm sorry. I wake up early and I had nothing to do. No, it's great. It's been a long time since the kitchen was this organized. It was true. Since Sarah died, Jack did the bare minimum to keep the house running. Can I keep helping? With the house, I mean, while I'm here. Jack looked at her. Rachel had dark circles under her eyes, but there was something different about her too, as if doing something useful made her feel better. If you want to, I do. It makes me feel normal. After Sophie went to school, Jack left for work. When he came back late in the afternoon, the house was transformed. Rachel had cleaned everything. The furniture was shining. The floor was waxed. The windows were clean. There was a vase of flowers from their own garden in the center of the dining room table. Rachel! Jack called out. In the kitchen. He went in and found Rachel preparing dinner. Something that smelled delicious was in the oven. What did you do? Lasagna. I hope you guys like it. Rachel turned to him, smiling. And I cleaned the house. I hope you don't mind. Jack looked around. The kitchen was spotless, everything in its place, everything clean, everything organized. For the first time in 2 years, the house felt alive. Rachel, you didn't have to. I know, but I wanted to. It's good for me to have something to do. Sophie arrived from school shortly after and was delighted with the changes. Wow, everything's so clean. And what's that good smell? Rachel made us lasagna, Jack explained. Really? I love lasagna. During dinner, Jack watched Sophie. She was more cheerful than she had been in weeks. She talked to Rachel about school, about her friends, about everything. Rachel listened attentively, asked questions, and smiled at her funny stories. And Jack noticed something else. The house had a different feel, lighter, as if it could finally breathe again. Daddy, can I show Rachel my drawings after dinner? Of course, Princess. I'd love to see them, Rachel said. After dinner, Sophie brought a pile of drawings to show Rachel. They sat on the living room couch, flipping through the papers. Jack stayed in the kitchen doing dishes, listening to them both laugh. How long had it been since he'd heard Sophie laugh like that? When he finished in the kitchen, Jack went to the living room. Sophie was explaining a drawing to Rachel. This is me, this is Daddy, and this was Mommy, Sophie was saying. Your mommy was beautiful, Rachel said softly. She was. She had hair just like mine. Jack sat in the armchair, watching them. Rachel held the drawing carefully. She must miss you guys, Rachel said. I think she's watching us from heaven, Sophie replied. And I think she's happy you came to live with us. Rachel glanced quickly at Jack, then back at Sophie. Why do you think that? Because the house is happier now and Daddy is smiling more. Jack felt his face get warm. Was he smiling more? He hadn't noticed. And you, Sophie, are you happy I'm here? Very, it's like having a big sister. Rachel smiled, but Jack saw her eyes fill with tears. That's wonderful, Sophie. That's wonderful. Later, after Sophie had gone to bed, Jack went to check on Rachel. He found her on the guest house porch, sitting in a chair, looking up at the stars. Can I sit? Of course. Jack sat in the chair next to her. How are you feeling? Better, much better, Rachel sighed. It's been so long since I felt useful. You were always useful, Rachel. No, with him, I was just an object. She looked at Jack. Here I feel like a person again. Jack was quiet for a moment. Sophie was right today. About what? The house really is happier. And I think I really am smiling more, Rachel smiled. Good. You guys deserve to smile. They sat in silence for a while, just listening to the sounds of the night. Jack? Thank you for letting me be a part of this, even if it's temporary. Jack looked at her. So who said it's temporary? Rachel looked at him, surprised. I assumed you'd want me to leave after the baby is born. The only person who decides when you leave is you, Rachel, and only when you feel ready. Rachel wiped away a tear. What if I never feel ready? Jack smiled. Then you stay. That night, for the first time in 2 years, Jack went to sleep feeling that the house was complete, not in the same way it was with Sarah, but complete in a new, different way. A way that included laughter in the living room, the smell of food in the kitchen, flowers on the table, a way that included life. And when he woke up the next morning to the smell of coffee and the sound of Rachel humming softly in the kitchen, Jack knew the lonely nights were over, the empty silences too. The house was breathing again. The smell of roast chicken filled the house when Jack appeared in the kitchen. Rachel was taking a golden brown dish out of the oven, her face flushed from the heat. It was Friday night, and he had an idea. How about we have dinner in the dining room tonight, he suggested, watching Rachel season the potatoes with fresh rosemary. Rachel stopped what she was doing and looked at him, surprised. At the big table? Are you sure? I'm sure. It's been a long time since anyone used that table. I think it would be special. Sophie appeared at the kitchen door like a blonde hurricane, drawn by the delicious smell. What would be special? She asked, curious as always. We're having dinner at the dining room table, Jack announced, smiling at his own decision. Sophie's blue eyes widened with pure joy. At the nice table? The big one with the gold plates. That's the one, Jack confirmed. Sophie started jumping with excitement, clapping her hands. Really, like in the movies, like a real family. Rachel laughed at the girl's contagious excitement. Like a real family, she confirmed, her heart warming at the words. Yeah, then we better set everything up nicely, Sophie declared, already running to get the special plates. She came back carrying the good plates with extreme care, as if they were made of solid gold. They were the plates with the golden rims that Jack hadn't used since Sarah died, stored in the top kitchen cabinet. These plates are the prettiest in the world, Sophie commented, admiring them against the light. They were your mother's, Jack said softly. She always said special food deserves special plates. Mommy was right, Sophie agreed. And today, we have special food. Can I get the crystal glasses too? She asked, already heading for the cabinet. Jack hesitated for only a moment. Those glasses were reserved for very important occasions, weddings, graduation, special celebrations, but looking at Sophie, at Rachel, at this whole scene of domestic joy, he realized that this was, indeed, a special occasion. You can get them, he said, and saw Sophie's smile widen even more. While Sophie ran to set the table, Rachel and Jack finished organizing the food. Besides the golden, fragrant chicken, she had prepared roasted potatoes with rosemary, a colorful salad with cherry tomatoes, and a platter of steamed vegetables. Everything looks delicious, Jack commented, stealing a small piece of potato. Thank you, they're all my Grandma Rose's recipes. She always said cooking is an act of love. Your grandma sounds like she was very wise. She was the wisest person I knew. She taught me that a well-set table and food made with care can heal almost any sadness. Sophie came running back from the dining room, her eyes shining with pride. Come see. The table looks beautiful. They followed her to the dining room and were genuinely impressed. Sophie had turned the table into a work of art. A flawless white tablecloth, golden plates positioned perfectly, crystal glasses sparkling in the light from the chandelier. In the center, she had placed a small vase with yellow flowers from the garden. Wow, Sophie, Rachel exclaimed, placing a hand on her chest. You have a natural talent for this. I learned from watching Mommy, Sophie said with obvious pride. She always made the table look nice when we had special guests. Jack felt a familiar pang in his chest, but this time it didn't hurt. It was a good kind of ache, full of affection and fond memories. She would be very proud of you, he said, running a hand through his daughter's blonde hair. Do you think she's watching us from heaven? Sophie asked, tilting her head. I'm sure she is, Rachel answered softly, and I bet she's smiling. They brought the food from the kitchen and sat down at the table. Jack at the head, as always, Sophie to his right, Rachel to his left. The arrangement felt completely natural, as if they had always dined this way. "This smells amazing," Sophie said, helping herself to a generous portion of chicken. "It looks like food from a fancy restaurant." "Try it first," Rachel asked, a little nervous. "I hope you like Grandma's recipes." Jack cut a piece of chicken and tasted it. The flavor was incredible, seasoned just right, juicy, with a special touch he couldn't quite identify. "Rachel, this is spectacular," he said sincerely. "Seriously, you cook better than a lot of restaurants." Sophie chewed with her eyes closed, making expressions of pure bliss. This is divine. What's the secret?" "The secret is fresh rosemary and a lot of love," Rachel replied, smiling. "Love really does make a difference in food," Sophie observed wisely. "Mommy's food tasted like love, even when she burned it." Everyone laughed at the innocent observation. "Did your mum burn food?" Rachel asked, amused. "Always," Sophie exclaimed. "She wasn't a very good cook, but she made the best sandwich in the world." "It was true," Jack confirmed, smiling at the memory. Sarah had many talents, but cooking wasn't one of them. "Tell Rachel about the pizza stuck to the ceiling," Sophie suggested excitedly. "Oh, that day was memorable," Jack laughed. "Tash, what do you mean, pizza stuck to the ceiling?" Rachel asked, already laughing just at the thought. "Daddy was trying to toss the dough in the air, like in the Italian movies," Sophie explained, gesturing dramatically, "but he threw it too hard. And the dough got stuck to the kitchen ceiling. We had to call the neighbor with a ladder to help get it down," Jack finished. Rachel was laughing so hard she had to wipe tears from her eyes. "And your mum? How did she react?" "She laughed so hard she cried," Sophie remembered. "Then she said we were just going to order a pizza, because at least the delivery guy knew how to toss dough right." "She could always find the funny side of things," Jack said, his voice full of affection. "Just like you, Rachel," Sophie observed. "You laugh at the funny things we do, too." Rachel was visibly moved. "It's because you two make me so happy." It had been a very long time since I laughed so much. "Why?" Sophie asked with innocence. Rachel looked at Jack, who gave a discreet nod of encouragement. "Because before I met you, I was going through some tough times, but now I'm very happy here." "Good," Sophie exclaimed, "because we're very happy with you here, too." The dinner continued with more stories. Rachel told them about the recipes she learned from her Grandma Rose, about how she taught her to cook early in the morning. Sophie talked about school, about the science project she was working on, about the drawings she wanted to show Rachel after dinner. Jack found himself completely relaxing, laughing more than he had in months. The table was overflowing with life, with lively conversations, with genuine and contagious joy. "Rachel," Sophie said suddenly, putting her fork down and getting serious. "Yes, sweetie. Are you going to live with us forever?" The question came out directly, full of hope and childlike vulnerability. Rachel's heart skipped a beat. She looked at Jack, who nodded almost imperceptibly, then back at Sophie. "I would love to stay with you if you'll have me." "Of course we want you," Sophie exclaimed, slapping her hand on the table with enthusiasm. "We love you." The words hung in the air for a moment. "We love you." Rachel felt tears welling up in her eyes. "I love you guys too," she whispered. Jack felt compelled to make it official. "Rachel, this is your home now. For as long as you want to stay." "Forever then," Sophie declared with the simple logic of a child, "because love is forever." Rachel couldn't hold back the tears. "Thank you. You don't know what this means to me." Sophie got up from her chair and ran to hug Rachel, who received her with infinite tenderness. "Now we're a real family," Sophie declared, still hugging Rachel. She pulled away from the hug and looked around the table, at Jack, who was smiling emotionally, at Rachel, who was wiping away tears of happiness, at the nice plates, the homemade food, the flowers in the center of the table, at this whole scene of perfect domestic harmony. And then, with a radiant smile that lit up her entire face, she said the words that would change everything forever. "We look like a family." The sentence echoed in the dining room like a lullaby. Rachel immediately lowered her eyes, too emotional to meet anyone's gaze. Her hands trembled slightly as she held her napkin, trying to contain the wave of emotions that washed over her. Jack fell completely silent. Sophie's words had hit him like a divine revelation. We looked like a family. It was true. Absolutely, unquestionably true. There they were, having dinner together at a table set with care and love, talking about everything and nothing, laughing at stories from the past, making plans for the future, taking care of each other, being genuinely happy together, exactly like a family. Like the family they had become. The silence stretched for long seconds, filled with pure emotion. Sophie returned to her chair, unaware of the seismic impact of her words. Rachel kept her eyes down, a soft but deeply emotional smile on her lips. Jack just watched, feeling something fundamental reorganize inside his heart. Finally, Rachel slowly raised her eyes and met Jack's gaze. They looked at each other in silence for a moment that felt like an eternity, and they both knew, without needing words, that Sophie had spoken the purest and simplest truth. They didn't just look like a family, they were a family. And for the first time in a long time, that didn't scare Jack. In fact, it made him feel whole again. Jack woke up to knocking on the main house door. It was 3 a.m. Jack, please." Rachel's voice was muffled, but full of urgency. He jumped out of bed and ran to open the door. Rachel was there, still in her nightgown, one hand braced against the wall, the other holding her belly. "Rachel, what happened?" I think it's time," she said between panting breaths. "The contractions started an hour ago, but now they're really strong." Jack felt a mix of panic and adrenaline. "Okay, stay calm. We'll go to the hospital. I'll get the keys and—" "Jack," Rachel interrupted him, her eyes filled with tears. "I don't have anyone." The sentence came out broken, laden with fear and loneliness. Rachel was referring to being alone at the most important moment of her life, with no family, no friends, no one to hold her hand. Jack stopped in front of her and gently held her shoulders. "You have us. And here, you're both safe." Rachel looked him in the eyes and nodded, a tear running down her face. In that moment, she knew she wasn't alone. "Daddy?" Sophie appeared at the top of the stairs, rubbing her eyes. "What's going on?" "Rachel's baby is coming," Jack explained quickly. "We're going to the hospital." Sophie was wide awake in an instant. "Now?" "Really? Now," Rachel confirmed, forcing a smile despite the pain. "Can I go too?" Sophie asked, running down the stairs. Jack hesitated for a second. It was the middle of the night. Sophie had school on Monday. "Please, Daddy, I want to be there when my little sister is born." "My little sister?" The words hit Jack hard. Sophie already considered the baby her sister. "Okay, but we'll have to wait in the waiting room." "I know, that's okay." They got ready quickly. Jack grabbed the bag Rachel had already packed. Sophie got dressed in record time, and in less than 10 minutes they were in the car. Rachel breathed in a controlled way in the back seat, with Sophie holding her hand. Does it hurt a lot?" Sophie asked, worried. "A little," Rachel admitted, "but it's normal. This is how babies are born." "Mommy told me what it was like when I was born," Sophie said. "She said it hurt, but when she saw me, she forgot about everything." Rachel smiled despite the contraction she was feeling. "Your mum was right." "That's exactly how it is." Jack drove as fast as he safely could, checking the rearview mirror every few seconds. "How are you doing? Do you need me to drive slower?" "No. This is good. I think it's getting stronger." They reached the hospital in 15 minutes. Jack parked at the emergency entrance and helped Rachel out of the car. Sophie carried the bag, feeling important for being able to help. "We need a wheelchair over here," Jack called out as soon as they entered. A nurse appeared immediately. "In labor?" "Yes," Rachel answered. "The contractions are about 3 minutes apart." The nurse brought a wheelchair and helped Rachel sit down. "We'll take her up to the maternity ward." "You are family?" Jack answered without hesitation. The nurse nodded and started pushing the chair. "The father can come," The girl will have to stay in the waiting room. I'm not the father, Jack clarified, but can I come anyway? Rachel squeezed his hand. Please, I'd like him to stay with me. The nurse looked at Jack, then at Rachel, and nodded. All right, but only one companion in the room. What about me? Sophie asked, worried. You'll stay in the waiting room, princess. I'll come back to be with you as soon as I can, Jack promised. But I want to be close. Rachel looked at Sophie and smiled. You'll be the first person to meet your little sister, okay? As soon as she's born, you'll get to see her. Sophie nodded, satisfied with the promise. They took Rachel to a room in the maternity ward. Jack settled Sophie in the waiting room with some books and magazines he found, promising to be back in a few minutes. In the room, Rachel was examined by the doctor. You're at 8 centimeters, the doctor announced. So the baby will be born soon. How long? Jack asked. An hour or 2 at most. Rachel squeezed Jack's hand during another contraction. Thank you for being here, she whispered. There's nowhere I'd rather be, he answered sincerely. The next hour passed quickly. The contractions got stronger and more frequent. Jack held Rachel's hand, offered her ice chips on, and helped with her breathing. He had never experienced this. With Sophie, Sarah had a C-section, and he hadn't been there for the labor. It's time, the doctor announced. On the next contraction, you're going to push. Rachel looked at Jack, her eyes full of determination and fear. You can do this, he said. I'm here, Rachel pushed. Once, twice, 3 times. I can see the head, the doctor exclaimed. One more time. Rachel pushed again, squeezing Jack's hand with all her strength, and then, at 5:47 in the morning, a loud cry filled the room. It's a girl, the doctor announced. A beautiful, healthy girl. Rachel started to cry with relief and happiness. Jack felt his own eyes fill with tears. Is she okay? Rachel asked. Perfect, the doctor said, placing the baby on Rachel's chest. Congratulations, Mom. Jack looked at the scene, Rachel holding her daughter for the first time, the baby, small and pink, crying loudly, and felt something move deep inside him. It was like watching a miracle. She's beautiful, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Lena, Rachel whispered, looking at her daughter. My little Lena. The baby calmed at the sound of her mother's voice, opening her little eyes for the first time. Look how perfect she is, Rachel said, gently touching her daughter's tiny face. Jack watched for a few minutes, giving them space for their first meeting. Then he remembered Sophie. Rachel, Sophie is dying to meet Lena. Can I go get her? Please, I want her to be the first. Jack left the room and went to the waiting area. Sophie was awake, nervously flipping through a magazine. Well, was she born? She asked, jumping up from her chair. She was born, Jack said, smiling. A beautiful little girl, Lena. Sophie shrieked with joy. Can I see her? Can I see her? You can. Rachel is waiting for you. They went back to the room. Rachel was sitting up in bed, Lena in her arms, still wrapped in a pink blanket. Sophie, Rachel called softly. Come meet your little sister. Sophie approached slowly, as if she were in a church. Wow, she whispered. She's so tiny. Do you want to hold her? Rachel offered. Can I? Of course, but sit here in the chair first. Sophie sat in the chair next to the bed. Rachel carefully placed Lena in her arms, helping her support the baby's head. Sophie looked at Lena with absolute reverence. The baby was awake, her tiny eyes moving as if trying to focus. Hi, Lena, Sophie whispered. I'm Sophie. Lena seemed to hear her voice and stirred slightly. She heard me, Sophie exclaimed quietly. Rachel, she heard me. Of course she did. She already knows you. You used to talk to her when she was in my tummy, remember? Sophie smiled, remembering the time she would place her hand on Rachel's belly to feel the baby kick. That's right. I always said hi to her. Jack watched the scene with a full heart. Sophie holding Lena with all the care in the world. Rachel smiling despite her exhaustion. The baby calm in her older sister's arms. Daddy, Sophie called, without taking her eyes off Lena. Come see how perfect she is. Jack came closer and looked at Lena up close. She had fine as dark hair, pink skin, and the most expressive little eyes he had ever seen on a newborn. "She really is perfect," he agreed. Sophie looked at Jack, then at Rachel, then back at Lena. Her face lit up with a radiant smile. "She's my little sister," Sophie declared, her voice filled with pride and love. The words echoed in the room like a promise, like an oath, like the final confirmation that they were indeed a family. Rachel started to cry with emotion. "And yes, she is, sweetie. She's your little sister. And I'm going to take care of her forever," Sophie promised solemnly. "I'm going to teach her how to draw and how to make pancakes and how to play in the garden." Jack's eyes burned. There they were. A family born from chance, from care, from a love that grew slowly. A family that now had one more member. "Can I hold her for a little longer?" Sophie asked. "You can," Rachel said. "She seems to like you." And it was true. Lena was completely calm in Sophie's arms, as if she already knew she was safe, that she was home, that she was with family. Jack looked at the three of them, Rachel exhausted but radiant, Sophie holding Lena with infinite love, Lena small and perfect, and knew his life had changed forever once again. But this time, the change didn't bring pain. It brought joy, it brought hope, it brought love. It brought a complete family. The sun was rising outside the hospital window, lighting up the room where a new life had begun. Not just Lena's life, but a new life for all of them. A life that would be built on love, care, and the certainty that family is what you build with your heart, and their hearts were full. It had been a week since Lena was born, when Jack found Rachel packing a suitcase in the guest house room. "What are you doing?" he asked, standing in the doorway. Rachel didn't look at him, continuing to fold the clothes she had been given during her pregnancy. "So I'm packing my things." "Why?" She finally stopped and turned to him. "Lena sleeping peacefully in the bassinet next to the bed, because I don't want to be a burden." Jack stood still for a moment, trying to process what he'd heard. "A burden, Rachel. What are you talking about?" "Jack, you've already done so much for me. You gave me shelter, took care of me, you were with me at the hospital." Rachel went back to folding clothes, avoiding his gaze. "Now that Lena is born, I can manage on my own." "But where will you go?" "I'll look for a small apartment. Maybe a part-time job, something I can do with Lena." Jack walked over to her. Rachel, you don't have to do this." "Yes, I do." She placed a shirt in the suitcase. "You've been too kind to me, but I can't take advantage of your kindness forever." "Who said you're taking advantage?" Rachel stopped packing and looked at him. "Jack, you have a life, you have work. Sophie has school, you have your routines. And now you have a baby crying at night, dirty diapers, a mess, and I don't want you to feel obligated to take care of me just because I have nowhere else to go." Jack sat on the edge of the bed. "Rachel, is that what you think? That we're taking care of you out of obligation? Isn't it?" The question came out so direct and vulnerable that Jack's heart ached. "No," he said firmly. "It's not an obligation." Rachel sighed and sat in the armchair next to Lena's bassinet. "Jack, I know you're good people. I know Sophie has grown attached to me and Lena, but I can't—" She paused, searching for the right words. "I can't live always waiting for you to change your minds." "Change our minds about what? About wanting me to stay?" Jack looked at her, hair in a messy bun, still looking tired from having a baby just days ago, but determined to leave. "Rachel, do you think we want you to leave?" "I think, eventually, you'll realize it would be easier without me here." Before Jack could answer, Sophie appeared at the door. "Rachel, what are you doing?" she asked, seeing the suitcase. "I'm just organizing some things," Rachel answered, trying to sound casual. Sophie walked into the room and saw the folded clothes in the suitcase. "Are you packing?" Rachel hesitated. "Hi, Sophie. Are you leaving?" Sophie's voice became high-pitched, scared. "I was thinking about—" "No!" Sophie shouted. "You can't leave!" "Sophie, calm down," Jack tried. "No, Daddy, she can't leave." Sophie ran to Rachel and threw herself into her arms. "Please don't leave." Rachel hugged Sophie, her heart breaking. "Sophie, honey, you promised you would stay. You said you were our family. I know, but... Sophie pulled away and looked at Rachel with tears in her eyes. You're my mom now. The words hung in the air like an echo. Rachel felt as if someone had punched her in the chest. Sophie. You're my mom, Sophie repeated, crying. You take care of me, you make food, you hug me when I have a nightmare, you're my mom. Rachel started to cry too. Sophie, And Lena is my sister, and Daddy is he's your... Sophie stopped, confused by her own feelings. Jack knelt beside Sophie. Hey, princess. Calm down. Daddy, tell her she can't leave. Jack looked at Rachel, who was crying silently. Sophie, go to your room for a few minutes. Rachel and I need to talk. But, go on, princess. I promise we'll talk about this. Sophie looked from Jack to Rachel one more time, then reluctantly left the room. Jack and Rachel were silent for a few minutes. Lena stirred in the bassinet but continued to sleep. She's right, Rachel said finally. About what? About me being her mother, because that's how I feel. Rachel wiped her tears. When she comes home from school and tells me about her day, when she asks me to help with her homework, when she wants me to read her a story before bed. I feel like her mother, Jack nodded, and Sophie feels like your daughter. That's why I have to leave, Rachel said, going back to packing her suitcase. Because the longer I stay, the harder it will be for all of us when this ends. Who says it's going to end? Rachel froze. Jack, be realistic. You've been a widower for 2 years. You're dealing with your grief, raising a daughter alone. The last thing you need is a woman with a newborn baby complicating your life. Jack stood up and went to the window. Do you know what the first thing I felt when you came here was? Pity. Fear. Rachel looked at him, surprised. Fear. Fear that you would bring change. Fear that Sophie would get attached to you. Fear that I would get attached to you. Jack turned to face her. Because after Sarah died, I thought I was fine this way. Just me and Sophie, safe, controlled, no risk of losing anyone else. Rachel remained quiet, listening. But then you arrived, and Sophie started smiling again. The house started to smell like real food. There started to be conversations at the dinner table. Jack moved closer to her, and I realized we weren't living. We were just existing. Jack, let me finish, he asked. When Lena was born, when I saw you holding her, saw Sophie holding her, I understood something. What? That family isn't just about blood. It's about choice. It's about taking care of each other. It's about being present. Jack knelt in front of the armchair where Rachel was sitting. Rachel, you are not a burden. You are not complicating our lives. I'm not. You brought life back into our home. Rachel began to cry again. Jack, I thought I couldn't love again. I thought my heart had died with Sarah. Jack took Rachel's hands. But I love you. Rachel stopped breathing. What? I love you, Jack repeated, his voice firm and certain. Not in the same way I loved Sarah, but I love you. I love the way you take care of Sophie. I love how you make coffee in the morning, humming softly. I love how you rock Lena to sleep. I love how you brought color back into this house. Rachel was crying so hard she could barely speak. Jack, and if you leave, it's not just Sophie who will be hurt. I will be too. Rachel looked at him through her tears. Are you sure? Absolutely. What if it doesn't work out? What if it does? Jack interrupted. What if we're happy? What if Sophie grows up with a sister? What if Lena grows up in a family that chose to love her? Rachel looked at Lena, who was waking up in the bassinet. Do you really want me to stay? I want you to do what you want to do. For the first time in your life, choose to stay because you want to stay. Not because you have no other option, not because you're running from something, but because you've chosen to stay. Rachel was silent for a long moment, looking at Jack, then at Lena, then at the half-packed suitcase. Finally, she stood up, went to the suitcase and started taking the clothes out. I choose to stay, she said softly. Jack smiled. Are you sure? I am, for the first time, by choice. They heard running footsteps in the hallway. Sophie appeared at the door, out of breath. "Well, is she staying?" Rachel turned to Sophie, smiling through her tears. "I'm staying!" Sophie screamed with joy and ran to hug Rachel. Jack joined the hug, and Lena, as if she knew something important was happening, woke up and smiled. 2 weeks later, the house had found its rhythm. Every morning, Jack woke up early and made coffee. Not the simple coffee from before, but real coffee, the way Rachel had taught him. He liked those quiet moments, when the house was still and he could hear the first sounds of the day beginning. Rachel would wake up shortly after, when Lena cried to be fed. She would come to the kitchen with the baby in her arms, still in her nightgown, hair messy from sleep. Jack would pour her coffee in a large mug, and they would talk softly while Lena nursed. They weren't deep conversations. They talked about the day ahead, about the weather, about small household things. But there was an intimacy in those moments that Jack had never experienced with Sarah. It was different, calmer, more stable. Sophie always woke up late, running through the house looking for a sock, a notebook, something she had forgotten for school. Rachel would laugh at her rushing around and always have breakfast ready, pancakes or scrambled eggs, or toast with homemade jam. "You're going to be late again," Jack would say every morning. "No, I'm not," Sophie would reply every morning, always being late anyway. But now there was laughter in the kitchen in the morning. There were conversations about the school day, about friends, about plans for the weekend. During the day, while Jack worked, Rachel took care of Lena and the house. But it wasn't an obsessive or desperate cleaning like it had been at the beginning. It was the natural care of someone who was at home, who belonged in that place. She would play soft music while she cleaned. She hummed to Lena while changing diapers. She prepared lunch calmly, trying new recipes from her Grandma Rose. The house had color now. There were fresh flowers on the dining room table every week. There were colorful cushions on the sofa. There were new photos of all of them together, of Lena sleeping, of Sophie holding her sister. In the afternoon, when Sophie came home from school, they would sit at the kitchen table to do homework. Rachel helped with math, with English, with science. Sophie would tell her about her friends, her teachers, the things she had learned, and Lena was always there in her bassinet or in Rachel's arms, watching everything with her curious little eyes. Sophie would talk to her, sing to her, make funny faces that made the baby smile. "Look, Rachel, she smiled at me," Sophie would shout every time she managed to get a smile out of her sister. "Of course she did. She adores you," Rachel would always reply. When Jack came home from work, the house was full of life. There was the smell of food in the air, the sound of conversations in the kitchen, sometimes a baby crying, sometimes music, always movement. It was the opposite of the silent house he had come home to for 2 years, and he no longer missed the silence. The evenings were Jack's favorite time. After dinner, after Sophie did her homework, after Lena was fed and clean, they would sit in the living room. Sophie would draw on the floor, Rachel would nurse Lena on the couch, Jack would read or watch TV. They didn't do anything special. They didn't have deep conversations every night, but there was a peace in those moments that Jack had never experienced. No sense of completeness. Sophie was always drawing the family. Drawings of 4 people holding hands, Jack tall and dark-haired, Rachel with long hair, Sophie small and blonde, Lena tiny in Rachel's arms. Sometimes she drew the house with all of them on the porch. Sometimes she drew Lena grown up, playing with her in the garden. "Stuart, can I put this drawing on the fridge?" she would always ask. "Of course," Rachel would always answer. The refrigerator was covered in family drawings. It was like an art gallery of Sophie's happiness. When Lena cried in the middle of the night, Jack would sometimes wake up and go check if Rachel needed help. He would find her walking through the house in her nightgown, rocking Lena, humming softly. "Need anything?" he would ask. "No, we're okay," she would always reply. She just wanted some company. And Jack would stay there for a few minutes, watching Rachel rock her daughter, singing a lullaby that her Grandma Rose had taught her. There was something deeply comforting about that scene. A woman and her baby in a quiet house, love being expressed through simple care. The love that existed between them wasn't explosive like in the movies. There were no dramatic declarations every week or grand gestures. It was a stable, present, warm love. It was Jack making coffee every morning just the way Rachel liked it. It was Rachel leaving his shirts out to be ironed. It was Sophie drawing the family every week. It was Lena smiling whenever she saw any of them. It was a house that breathed with its own rhythm, that had life, routine, small details that made a difference. They were 4 people who had chosen to become a family, and who, day after day, continued to choose to be together. Not because they had to be, but because they wanted to be, because they were happy this way, because, finally, they were all home. It was a perfect Saturday afternoon. Rachel was sitting on the living room sofa, Lena in her lap, watching television. The baby had just finished feeding and was drowsy, her little eyes slowly closing. Rachel stroked her daughter's fine hair, feeling the peace that only these moments brought. From the kitchen came the sounds of laughter. Jack was teaching Sophie how to make chocolate chip cookies, and from the noises, the lesson was more fun than educational. "Daddy, the dough can't be this sticky," Sophie laughed. "Sire, then stop putting flour on it," Jack replied, also laughing. "But you told me to add more flour." Rachel smiled, listening to the conversation. These were the moments she loved most, when the house was full of happy voices, when everything felt simple and right. The local news was on the television. Rachel wasn't paying much attention, more focused on Lena and the sounds from the kitchen, until an image on the screen caught her eye. "And now, in police news," the anchor was saying, "a man was arrested last night for attempted theft at a supermarket." Rachel glanced at the screen distractedly, but then she saw a photo that made her blood run cold. It was him, Marcus. Lena's father, her ex-boyfriend. The photo was a mugshot. His hair was longer. He had a stubble, but it was definitely him. The same dark eyes she knew so well. Rachel stopped breathing. The suspect, Marcus Evans, 31, was caught trying to steal products from the Central Market in Riverside, the anchor continued. According to police, he already had a record for domestic violence and was wanted for violating a restraining order. The camera showed footage of the arrest, Marcus being put into a police car, handcuffed, his head down. Rachel felt the world spin. Lena stirred in her lap, as if sensing her mother's tension, but remained asleep. For months, Rachel had looked over her shoulder. She had checked the doors twice before going to sleep. Her heart had pounded every time she saw a man who looked like Marcus on the street. Even living with Jack, even feeling safe, a part of her always expected him to show up. Always feared the moment the door would open and Marcus would be there, furious. But now, seeing him on television, handcuffed, being taken away by the police, Rachel felt something she hadn't experienced in a very long time. Complete relief. She froze for an instant, processing what she was seeing. Then, slowly, she let out a light, deep sigh. "Now I can finally breathe," she whispered to herself. The tension she carried in her shoulders, the fear that lived in the back of her mind, it all began to unravel like a knot that had finally been untied. Marcus was in jail. He wasn't going to show up at the door. He wasn't going to try to take her away. He wasn't going to hurt Lena. Rachel kissed her daughter's forehead and smiled. For the first time in a long time, perhaps for the first time since she found out she was pregnant, she felt completely free. "Rachel!" Sophie yelled from the kitchen. "Come see our cookies." "Coming!" Rachel replied, turning off the television. She went into the kitchen with Lena in her arms. Jack and Sophie were covered in flour, but smiling. On the table were cookies of a questionable shape, but they smelled good. "What have you two been up to?" Rachel asked, laughing. "Culinary art," Jack replied, wiping flour from his forehead. "Free-form cookies," Sophie added. Rachel laughed, and Jack noticed something different about her, a new lightness. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I am, Ma," Rachel replied, and it was completely true. "I'm great." The following Sunday, they decided to have lunch in the backyard. It was a perfect autumn day, with gentle sun and a cool breeze. Jack set up a makeshift table with 2 smaller tables and a checkered tablecloth. Rachel prepared sandwiches and fruit salad. Sophie brought out cushions. Lena was awake, lying on a blanket on the lawn, watching the leaves sway in the wind. She couldn't focus perfectly yet, but she seemed fascinated by the movement. She loves being outdoors, Sophie observed, lying down next to her sister. Babies like nature, Rachel explained. My grandmother always said we're born knowing we belong to the earth. Jack sat next to Rachel, watching Sophie interact with Lena. The age difference, 5 years, didn't seem to matter. Sophie treated Lena like she was the most precious thing in the world. Sophie is going to be an amazing sister, he commented. She already is, Rachel agreed. They ate in silence for a few minutes, enjoying the sun and the sound of the birds. It was a simple lunch, but there was something special about it. Sophie finished eating and lay down on the blanket next to Lena, making funny faces at her sister. "Lena, look here," she whispered. "It's me, your favorite sister." "She only has one sister," Jack reminded her. "Exactly." "That's why I'm the favorite," Sophie replied, getting a smile out of Lena. Rachel watched the scene with a full heart. Lena smiling at Sophie, Jack relaxed on the grass, the sun shining on all of them. It was a perfect moment. Suddenly, Sophie sat up and looked around the yard, then at the house, then at all of them. "You know what I was thinking," she said. "What?" Jack asked. "Before it was just a house. Now it feels like a full house." The words hung in the air like music. Jack stopped chewing and looked at Sophie, then at Rachel, then at Lena. "A full house," he repeated. "Yeah," Sophie continued. "Before, when it was just me and Daddy, the house was so quiet, kind of empty." She looked at Rachel. "But now there are voices in every corner. It smells like real food. There's laughter, there's music." She pointed to Lena. "And there's a baby laughing." Rachel felt her eyes fill with tears. "And there's a lot of love," Sophie completed. Jack stood up suddenly. "Wait here," he said, running inside the house. Jack came back with a camera in his hands. "We need a picture," he announced. "Now?" Rachel asked. "Right now, just as we are, in the backyard, with Lena on the blanket." Jack smiled. "A real family photo." Sophie clapped her hands. "Our first full family photo." They arranged themselves on the blanket. Rachel held Lena in her lap. Sophie snuggled up beside her. Jack set the timer and ran to get into position. "Say cheese!" he shouted. "Cheese!" Sophie yelled, laughing. Rachel smiled genuinely, feeling completely happy. Lena was awake, looking at the camera with curiosity. The flash went off. "Let's see how it turned out," Jack said. They gathered around to see. The photo showed exactly what they were, a happy family in a backyard, on an ordinary Sunday, smiling for the camera. It wasn't posed or perfect, it was real. "It's just a photo," Jack said, but there was emotion in his voice. "No," Rachel corrected. "It's everything." They looked at the photo in silence. Lena yawned in Rachel's lap. Sophie was already planning where they would put the picture. "Can I say something?" Jack asked. "Of course," Rachel replied. Jack looked at the three of them, then at the house, then at the yard. "I never imagined this ending," he said. "What do you mean?" Sophie asked. "When your mum died, I thought it would always be just the two of us. I thought I would never have a complete family again." Jack looked at Rachel. "I never imagined that a pregnant woman sitting on a curb would change our entire lives." Rachel smiled, remembering that first day. "I didn't imagine it either. And now I have a little sister," Sophie said, looking at Lena. Jack sat on the grass again, watching his family, because that's what they were now. "You know what's most incredible?" he continued. "What?" Rachel asked. "I spent 2 years afraid of change, afraid of letting someone new into our lives, afraid of loving again." Jack looked directly at Rachel. "But now, I wouldn't change a thing." "Nothing?" Sophie asked. "Nothing," Jack confirmed. "I wouldn't change the day we found Rachel. I wouldn't change her coming to live with us. I wouldn't change Lena being born. I wouldn't change a single day we've spent together." Rachel felt tears of happiness stream down her face. "Not even the hard days?" she asked. "Especially the hard days," Jack replied. "Because it was the hard days that made us a real family." Sophie stood up and hugged Jack. "I wouldn't change anything either," she said. Rachel joined the hug with Lena in her lap. For a moment, they stayed like that, 4 people hugging in a backyard on a Sunday afternoon. When they separated, Lena was asleep again. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange. "Should we start packing things up?" Rachel suggested. "In a little bit," Jack said. "Let's just stay here a little longer." And they did, sitting on the blanket, watching the sunset, listening to the birds. A family that had found each other when they least expected it. A family built on care and the courage to love again. A family that, finally, was complete. And for the first time in a long time, they all knew exactly where they belonged, right there together at home. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.